Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome in to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. It is Thursday, February 4th, and I believe we are finally through the snowstorm here in the Northeast. It has rained down snow for the past 72 hours. Here in greater Philadelphia, you got anywhere between 8 to 14 inches, depending on which side of the city you're on. And as you moved further north up to Allentown, the Pocono Mountains, they got 27, 28 inches worth of snow. And I'm assuming it's very similar for those of you listening in the greater New York area, Connecticut, Boston, Massachusetts, kind of all up and down the Northeast was just pummeled with snow here to start the month of February. We had a storm back in December. The month of January treated us very nicely. But here we are to start off February in the spring training month. Of course, when my mind's down in Florida, down in Arizona, getting ready for pitchers and catchers, that's when we decide to get another 13, 14 inches of snow here at my house. So if you guys are in the Northeast, please stay safe. Take care of yourselves. I know it took me 3 different shifts in order to get all that snow out of the driveway just to make sure I didn't throw my back out or have any issues like that. So I know you guys out there are doing the same. And if you're listening to us down south or out west, if you're out golfing at the beach or whatever you're up to, just think of us, up here in the Northeast, because staring out my window, I can't even open my back door with the amount of snow piled up against it here. But again, we're into February, spring training only a couple of weeks away, and unfortunately, we have to start out today's episode with another negative connotation on the game of baseball. I mean, baseball itself, just as a whole, as kind of a generalization, is just really trying to self-sabotage. I mean, every time that just the game of baseball is related to some sort of news story that gets national attention, and these type of news stories I'm talking about are not the ones via trade or don't have to deal with player interactions, just kind of a big picture baseball type of story, every single time just shooting ourselves in the foot. I mean, it goes back 2-3 years now with the Astros cheating scandal, followed by the Red Sox cheating scandal. Then we had Commissioner Bobby Manfred come out and call the World Series trophy a piece of metal and just completely degrade the most prized possession in the game of baseball. I mean, the commissioner is basically just talking down any sort of World Series. Yeah, good job, guys. You guys won a piece of metal. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting what is happening. And then here this offseason, we've had 2 instances now where sexual harassment and sexual misconduct allegations are coming out. And if you haven't heard yet, which I'm sure you have by the time you're listening to this on Thursday or Friday, the Los Angeles Angels pitching coach Mickey Callaway has been suspended after he was accused by 5 women of lewd behavior. And now Callaway has come out and denied these allegations. He said that every interaction has been consensual, and basically because he has denied the allegations, the Angels just cannot come out and fire him without, quote, just cause, thus leading to the suspension, and the Angels will be working with investigators to try to learn more. But this is the second type of article we've seen based on type of sexual misconduct here in about 3 to 4 weeks. And the underlying theme here is that a lot of this is taking place in the game of baseball. I mean, I'm reading from reporters, people inside the game, having interactions that this may just be the tip of the iceberg when it comes to these type of accusations, which is certainly going to be a huge black eye on the sport of baseball. And apparently it's been known, or the worst kept secret in baseball that Mickey Callaway acted like this, and this is not only during his time with the Angels, this is not recent, but this goes back to his time with the New York Mets when he was manager of the Mets. There's also acquisitions during the Cleveland Indians tenure, and honestly, before we kind of get into a few more details on what's happening, I just wanted to reiterate that the New York Mets need to make astronomical changes to what is happening right now. I mean, this is 3 times they've been in the news here in the past month for huge negative responses. And yes, everybody wants to look the other way and look to what they're doing on the field and trading for Lindor, and they get Carlos Carrasco, and everybody, look, we're putting together a great baseball team. But the underlying theme here in the New York Mets organization is that this is an extremely poor run organization with no morals or values when it comes to their organization at all. I mean, first you have Jared Porter, who was recently hired as general manager, and then a week and a half to 2 weeks later comes out that he's texting nude photos, making unwanted advances, doing basically everything that just a disgusting human being would do out there. A week or two after that, you have owner Steve Cohen getting into a bit of a Twitter spat when it comes to GameStop and the recent stock market going back and forth, and then all of a sudden his Twitter has been deactivated, so the new owner is being thrown under the bus, going back at random people on Twitter. And now here we have Mickey Callaway, who, yes, is now currently with the Angels, but during his time with New York, apparently was sending shirtless photos, was asking for nude requests. He was thrusting his crotch during interview processes with females. And again, over 3 organizations over the course of 5 years. So this is nothing new. But this is just, like I mentioned, the tip of the iceberg. You talk to people who are involved with this sport, and they say that, quote, it is about to rain down on Major League Baseball. And this is absolutely frightening as a fan, as somebody who enjoys the sport, as somebody who covers it for GSMC here on the podcast and on social media. And the comments that have been made from people who do have connections within baseball is that what's going to happen when the first accusation or first kind of outlet comes against a superstar player? What type of repercussions are we going to see there? Because, yes, we've seen it against general managers and now managers/pitching coaches, and they seem to lose their jobs. But what happens when this comes out against a superstar player? Because apparently, basically, what's been happening behind the scenes is that people like Callaway and Porter have been exchanging information in regards to potential sexual advances. So they're going to these female reporters and saying, hey, I'll talk to you about what you want to hear, or I'll give you the information you need in order to write your story, but you have to have drinks with me, or I want this photo, or we have to do X, Y, and Z in order for this to happen. And this becomes, a double-edged sword for the female reporter, because on one case, okay, say if it is consensual and they say, yes, okay, I'm going to do this. I need to write this story. I need to advance my career. I want to stay in journalism as a female, cover the sport of baseball. Well, then all of a sudden, Mickey Callaway is going back to his locker room, to his clubhouse, and sharing with everybody involved that XYZ reporter may have loose morals or loose standards, and you're going to want to talk to her and interact with this person. Or if this woman declines these advances or basically says, hey, I don't want anything to do with that, then they are completely shut off from that team or that organization. The Mickey Callaway Porter shares that within the organization, says, hey, don't talk to them. They're not willing to do certain things to advance their career, so we're going to shut them out of this locker room and not allow them to cover this additional information moving forward. So if you're a reporter, you either stand up for yourself internally and with your morals and your compass and potentially ruin your career and don't get the information or advances that you would have, or you go on the other side and you do have dinner with this person, but then you're known within the industry and get a reputation that isn't particularly true. And the fact that this happens across baseball and is kind of known, like I mentioned, people are coming out and saying, hey, this is the worst kept secret. It's just extremely frustrating from a fan's perspective and just a huge black eye on the game of baseball. I mean, like I said, for the last 3 years, every time, hey, here's a national story regarding baseball, it is 100% negative in regards to the game. It's almost like baseball is trying to kill itself off. I mean, we know it is losing its popularity year after year. The average age of the fan continues to increase year after year, and they're doing absolutely nothing to save themselves moving forward. It's just so frustrating to see this, to hear this, and to, again, just understand that within the game, apparently it's understood. This happens. This is the way it goes, and it shouldn't be. So just be better, everyone, across the board, and specifically the New York Mets. I know I'm upsetting Mets fans here if they're listening to this, but your entire organization needs an overhaul, similar to what happened to the Washington football team. I mean, it's clear that they're hiring a general manager not knowing anything about this. You had a manager being hired not knowing anything about this. It's almost like one of the requirements to work for the Mets is to be a scumbag. Like, yeah, fill out that checkbox. Hey, are you a scumbag? Yes. Okay, you can come work here. So just be better, everyone out there. It's extremely frustrating and just so tough to handle as a fan when I'm looking at what I'm going to be reporting on for each podcast. Hey, which topics am I going to discuss? What's going on in the game of baseball? What's the latest? Oh, great. Another sexual accusation for misconduct being had that I have to talk about again here on the show, because I know this isn't what you guys want to hear about, and this isn't what I want to talk about. I want to be talking about player trades, player signings, previews for next year, and we're going to get into all of that here later in the show. But once again, for the first 15 minutes, I have to discuss something like this with you guys, and according to some insiders, more is going to rain down because finally the females within the industry have decided to stand up for themselves, and more are going to come out with accusations against potential superstars, against potential players. And what's going to happen there? What happens if somebody for the Yankees, a big-time guy, gets accused of this, or somebody with the Phillies, or name any big market team? Is it going to be a slap on the wrist? Or are they going to get suspended for 25, 50 games? I mean, the PED suspension is 82 games, half the year here. So is this going to be in line with that? Or are we just getting, hey, you get the weekend off type of thing? So here comes Bobby Manfred once again. I'm sure going to have to come out and talk about it. And that guy's such an eloquent speaker that everything's going to go smooth, and he'll probably, right under the rug, no problem. So it's just a snowball effect here where now Manfred's going to have to talk about it, and he is just one of the worst speakers ever. So, it's frustrating. But I do apologize again for kind of coming at a couple of people there, a couple of organizations, but we all need to do better. We just, everybody in the game of baseball needs to look in the mirror and needs to improve, because I'm absolutely disgusted by all of this stuff, saying, hey, choose between me and your career, get out of baseball forever. Just go away. It's worse than PEDs. You being a scumbag of a human being is absolutely filthy, and you need to disappear into the sunset immediately. So, transitioning here for the last couple of minutes in segment number one, I did want to bring light to a few articles that have been released here in the past 48 hours regarding the mental health of the individuals in baseball. Jeff Passan released a big article on ESPN that detailed Drew Robinson and his potential suicide case, or attempted suicide case, I should say. He obviously lived through it, and the story goes on until, how it's now his story to tell and help with mental health and positivity. And soon after that, Andrelton Simmons of the LA Angels opted out of the last couple of weeks of the 2020 season, and he cited suicidal thoughts and depression as a big reason why he made this decision. Driving through the city, seeing the homeless, seeing everybody infected by the pandemic, it was just overwhelming to him, and he needed to step aside and go to therapy. So I did want to shed light on mental health, not only in sports, but just in general, that it is okay to discuss this. I know I myself, I've dealt with depression, suicidal thoughts, and, worked with therapy and discussion with others. And it's a very taboo subject still out there when it comes to society and the thoughts of, well, how could a professional athlete have this many struggles? I mean, Simmons just signed for $12 million. How could he potentially have any issues? Drew Robinson had played professionally, was highly drafted, highly regarded. How could he potentially have issues? And number one, money has absolutely nothing to do with mental health. Stop thinking that because these guys have money that they're fine mentally. That is just a completely false connotation that needs to be removed from society. monetary issues and mental health do not go hand in hand. Yes, it could help relieve some stresses that maybe you or I are dealing with who aren't making millions of dollars a year. But once you get those stresses do not disappear. They just manifest themselves in different areas, okay? Yeah, you're maybe not worried about how you're paying the mortgage, but you're worried about 50 people asking you for money and how you're going to let them down, and now they're going to think I'm a bad person. So stress just does not disappear based on the amount of money you have. It just creates itself in different lights. So if you're dealing with any issues out there, please feel free to comment. Like I said, I've gone through it a little bit, so I'm more than willing to talk to you guys. But talk to a therapist, talk to your friends, bring it up, have those discussions. When you have those discussions, try to share your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. A lot of time conversations can be very transactional or very informational. Hey, how was your day? I did this, this, and this. Well, that's fine, but share the feelings or thoughts you had while completing those tasks, because that's what's actually happening in your world, and not just, I went grocery shopping or I'm dealing with this. Because here in the Northeast, we couldn't get outside for 3 days. It was dark, snowy, cold, windy, and I had a little bit of a spout over the last 48 hours just dealing with some stir craziness, being like, what do I do here? I'm home alone. What's happening? So it's certainly an issue out there, but a few different stories had come out in the last 48 hours I wanted to touch on with you guys. So that'll wrap things up for the first segment. Again, not the way I really intended or wanted to start the show, but I'm going to talk to you guys about what's going on in baseball. I'm going to give you my thoughts and feelings. Whether you agree or disagree, that's totally up to you, and I respect your opinion. But again, that'll do it here for segment number 1. We're going to step aside for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, but when we come back, we're going to talk to you guys about signings, trades, rumors, the good stuff with baseball. So stick around, everybody. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, and thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. If you guys haven't rated and reviewed the podcast, please take a moment to do so wherever you're listening to this, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, Alexa, what else? I mean, more and more podcast platforms are becoming available day in and day out here. So like, subscribe, rate, review, whatever it is on that particular website. That certainly goes a long way for helping us continue to grow. Recently, we were named the 13th best baseball podcast out there available, and I wanted to continue to jump up that rating. Let's see if we can get into the top 10. And we need your help to do that. So continue to text a friend, be a friend, tell a friend, let them know, check out this podcast, but even more so, leave a comment, hit that 5-star rating. That certainly helps me out big time as we're moving forward here and helps us out within the podcast network continue to grow and bring you guys quality content day in and day out here moving forward. So please do that, but let's jump into player signings, trades, rumors, everything going on across Major League Baseball out there. Things are picking up a little bit, but a lot of it is still on the secondary market, and basically all of it is at the 1-year level. So we are at that point in the offseason where 2 out of the 3 big fish, 5 out of the top 10 big fish, whichever list or ranking you're looking at here, have been signed. Trevor Bauer is still the only one on the pitching side of things that is kind of waiting for the rest of the market to start to fall. Offensively, we had Springer and Real Muto sign, which now has certainly led to people about a tier down start to understand their market. Teams who could have potentially been in on those big fish now know they're not going to get them, so they can reallocate this money, and we're starting to see more deals start to manifest themselves here day by day. But After the recent proposal decline by the Players Association, Nelson Cruz got a bit more clarity in regards to his market. And this was due to the fact that I reported last week he was waiting to see if a universal DH would be implemented for 2021. This was due to the fact that his market could increase if this were the case, such as the Cardinals, the Braves, the Dodgers could potentially be in on Cruz as a DH. But since the Players rejected that proposal, and it looks like the pitchers are going to hit for the National League again here this next year, his market was only in the American League. And that led to him re-signing with the Minnesota Twins for 1 year, $13 million. So the ageless wonder Nelson Cruz, as he is over 40 years old, his birthday is in July, so he will turn 41 during this season. But looking back on his statistics the past handful of years, man, he is not slowing down in any way whatsoever. So the last 2 years with the Twins, he hit .311 back in 2019 with 41 home runs, 108 RBIs. Last year he had 16 home runs, hitting .303. And I mean, this is a guy that has just gotten better with age. I mean, starting out with his age 33 season in Baltimore, when he transitioned from Texas to Baltimore, his home run total, 40, 44, 43, 39, 37, and 41 from age 33 to 38. And this is particularly a time where people slow down. So my goodness, it is just fascinating to see him continue to mash baseballs. And if I'm the Twins, I'm very excited about bringing Nelson Cruz back, because he's been one of the stalwarts in the middle of that lineup from the right side, and he has just absolutely excelled in Minnesota and continued his torrid pace that he put up for Seattle over the course of 4 years. I mean, goodness gracious, 4 years in Seattle, 284 average, 163 home runs, and 414 RBIs. So my man averaged 40 home runs and over 100 RBIs in Seattle, and it's a shame that they let him walk, but he's continued that pace at age 38 and 39, and he'll look to do so again here at age 40, 41 in regards to his time in Minnesota. Next on the list, we have left-handed pitcher Andrew Chafin, C-H-A-F-I-N. Chafin, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it out there, so sorry, Andrew. But he was with the Chicago Cubs, 1 year, $2.25 million. There is a mutual option for the 2022 season. That number is $5.25 million with a $500,000 buyout. So either way, Andrew's going to get $2.75 guaranteed. He finds himself being with the Cubs. He'll go to the bullpen here, it looks like. He's been a bullpen guy his entire life. He was traded from Arizona to the Cubs last year at the end of the season. Only threw 3 innings for them after 6 in Arizona, so battling some injuries coming back. But during his time in Arizona, he's certainly a solid left-hander out of the bullpen. 10-12 career record with a 3.68 ERA and 271 innings. So he is not a closer. He only has 3 career saves, but 6th, 7th, 8th inning guy from the left side certainly seems to be a viable option there for Chicago as they try to not fully rebuild, but also compete in the National League Central. I think this is a good signing for them. Of course, we talked about how much better the Cardinals got adding Nolan Arenado, but the Cubs, if they keep some of their pieces, get some bounce-back seasons from some of their main guys like Baez, Bryant, Contreras, if he's still on the roster, they could potentially be in that second-place spot and pushing for a playoff appearance there in Chicago. Next on the list, we have Chris Archer, right-handed pitcher. He signs back with the Tampa Bay Rays. 1 year, $6.5 million. Now, Chris Archer did not participate in the 2020 season. He underwent some surgery and then opted out. But just looking back to his time in Tampa, he was traded from Tampa to Pittsburgh in the middle of 2018 and then spent 2019 there and did not pan out for Pittsburgh. He was 6-12 with a 4.92 ERA and 172 innings, but that wasn't the guy he was in Tampa Bay. He was 54-68 with a 3.69 ERA and just over 1,000 innings. So Archer, he finished 5th in the Cy Young voting back in 2015 when he was an All-Star. He was also an All-Star in 2017, finished third in Rookie of the Year voting in 2013. So I believe Archer's going back to some familiarity down there in Tampa Bay, where some of their analytics and sabermetrics allows him to be a bit more successful than his time there in Pittsburgh. But this will ultimately come down to health. I do think it is a bit of a risk giving him $6.5 million. But again, Tampa's familiar with the product. They're familiar with the person, and they feel that they can get him back to throwing and being who he was in years past. So it'll be fascinating to see if ultimately Tampa can get him back on the right track, and if it was just utilization in Pittsburgh in regards to pitch usage, pitch placement. So it'll be fascinating to follow Chris Archer. But I've always been a fan of Archer. I know he struggled in Pittsburgh, but again, I liked his stuff. I liked his energy during his time there down in Tampa Bay. Let's see. Left-handed pitcher Sean Doolittle signed with the Cincinnati Reds. 1 year, $1.5 million. I thought this was a bit under market value for Doolittle. I mean, he's been solid over the past couple of seasons. Yes, in 2020, he struggled, only through 7 innings, but dating back to 2018, 2019, I mean, the guy was 3-3 with a 1.60 ERA during an all-star season in 2018. Things went a bit downhill in 2019. 6-5 with a 4.05 ERA, but a career ERA, let's see here, at 3.07 from the left side. He's got 111 career saves. He had 25 in 2018, 29 in 2019. So the Reds are looking to put him at the back end of the bullpen. They could pair him with Amir Garrett, a few other internal candidates to close out games. But at $1.5 million for Sean Doolittle, a veteran who will turn 35 in September during the end of this next season. It'll be interesting to see if he can kind of come in and stabilize that bullpen out there in Cincinnati and kind of right the ship for what they're looking to do. The last signing we have to report here is right-handed pitcher Chase Anderson, signed with the Philadelphia Phillies. 1 year, $4 million contract, and honestly, the locals are not pleased with this signing. They look at it as they gave Chase Anderson $4 million. They gave left-handed pitcher Matt Moore, who was in Japan last season, $3 million. And you're looking at other guys out there on the market like Archer, who signed for 6.5, thinking that him or Odorizzi around this market would be much better usage of that money. But the Phillies are basically looking for lottery tickets. They're, shooting the shotgun out here, spraying all the bullets across the board. They brought in a couple of guys on minor league deals, a handful of bullpen guys on minor league deals, a few number 5 starters on major league deals that $4 or $3 million aren't fantastic. But, looking at Anderson, you kind of got to skip over his 2020 with Toronto. I mean, the guy started 10 games, 1-2 with a 7.22 ERA. But if you back that up and look at his time in Milwaukee, he was a fine pitcher. I mean, in Milwaukee, he went 38-27, a 3.83 ERA over the course of 112 starts. His best year was 2017 when he went 12-4 with an ERA of 2.74. So again, the Phillies are putting their money in guys who have shown excellence between the years of 2016 and 2018, hoping that the change of scenery can kind of regain their form. And if they do hit on one or a couple of these particular, high-risk guys, it could work out for them very beneficially. But if you look at their 2020 performances and recent performances, it certainly lends the fans to be very upset with what's taken place here in Philadelphia. So I get it. I don't have high expectations for him. People are upset that they could use their money elsewhere. And I think the Phillies still need to add a bullpen piece. But Chase Anderson added to the Fightin' Phils at 1 year, $4 million. We also had a trade take place over the past couple of days between the Angels and the Orioles. The Angels acquired starting pitcher Alex Cobb from Baltimore, as well as some cash in regards to a prospect going the other way, Jahmai Jones, a second baseman, center fielder for the Angels. He goes back to Baltimore, pencils in to be their second baseman. He made his major league debut last year. He played 3 games, went 3 for 7 so just got a taste of the big leagues, and he was ranked the number 7 overall prospect in the Angels organization. So they do give up a piece there in order to get Alex Cobb back, but they got some cash and kind of a 1-for-1 deal in regards to the Angels. So bringing in Cobb, who has been better as of late in regards to the past couple of years. Yes, in 2019 he got hurt, he was injured, had 3 starts, only 12 innings, but a year prior, a 4.90 ERA. Last year, 4.30. And this is during his time in Baltimore, which, again, isn't a very good baseball team. Defensively, offensively behind him. So, nobody's really making plays for him on that side of things. And I like it for the Angels. They're basically getting an innings eater who, over the course of his career, has shown he can stay healthy. And they're looking to kind of stabilize that rotation here as they make a push in the American League West. So that does it for the expected signings, according to sources, all that good stuff. A lot of this pending physicals have not been formally announced yet, but let's dive into a few rumors here as we wrap up segment number 2. Now that Nelson Cruz is back in Minnesota, they're putting their sights on pitching. They got interest in Alex Callaway, right-hander who closed for the White Sox the past couple of years. We've touched on him. A lot of people interested. I kind of find it fascinating that he has not signed yet. Apparently, teams have not coughed up the monetary value that he is looking for. He's also been tied to the Astros, Padres, Phillies, Red Sox, but I think his market is going to come to a head here sooner than later in regards to him making a move. The Rockies general manager has stated he expects Trevor Story to start the season with the team. Of course, there's speculation now after trading Nolan Arenado. Story will be a free agent after the year, so why hang on to him if he's not going to re-sign? Certainly makes sense here, but looks like he will be a mid-season trade piece and not an off-season trade piece for Colorado. The Red Sox and Phillies are among 6 teams interested in utility infielder Marwin Gonzalez, or I guess I should say utility infield or outfield, as he's played all of those positions moving forward. The Phillies are involved. There's a couple of other teams that are being rumored out there. Like I said, Red Sox, Phillies, a couple of 6 teams. So they're looking to potentially make a move here. Interest remains high on Jake Odorizzi, but his market is kind of pending on where Trevor Bauer is still available. Bauer could be headed to the Angels now that Mickey Callaway is out of there. Him and Mickey did not see eye to eye in Cleveland, and honestly, what happened and what was released may be a big reason why. It was also reasoning why he wasn't going to go to the Mets and now the Angels, but if he's out of the picture, potentially Los Angeles gets back involved. But everybody on kind of that Tier 2 starters market is really waiting to see how Bauer pans out and if they can make any directions or any moves from there. So the Angels, Red Sox, Blue Jays, Giants, Twins have all been linked to Jake Odorizzi, and a lot of them have been linked to Trevor Bauer as well. So once Bauer makes his decision, I think that will lend Odorizzi and the rest of the Tier 2 guys to kind of make theirs here moving forward. But that'll do it for segment number 2 in regards to signings, rumors, what's going on roster-wise moving forward. So we'll step aside here now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we're going to start our previews and predictions. It's about time. 2 weeks until spring training. Start a trip around Major League Baseball. Give you guys my thoughts on what's going to happen. We're going to start in the American League, work west to east. So we're going to come back discussing the American League West right after this.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello again, and thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys listening in. If you haven't checked us out on social media, please take a moment to do so. I know you're on your phone somewhere listening to this, so hit that little Facebook icon, the Twitter icon, LinkedIn icon. Check out both the GSMC Baseball Podcast as well as the GSMC Podcast Network. I appreciate it. We'll keep you guys up to date on everything going on across Major League Baseball, as well as the Podcast Network. We'll keep you guys up to date on everything going on out there. News, politics, cars, movies, music, whatever it is. You guys can follow those pages and stay up to date with everything going on out there across America, basically. So we're jumping into segment number 3 here, and like I mentioned, I think it's a great time to start our preview and predictions across Major League Baseball. A couple of weeks until spring training. I know there are the way too early predictions being thrown around out there, and these are probably slightly on the earlier side as well, but I do like to wait for some of the dominoes to fall, see where some of the free agents are going to sign before ultimately I give you guys my thoughts on what's going to happen here in 2020-21. But with that being said, let's jump into the American League West. Let's start out west in the AL, and then we'll work our way east and transition over to the National League here over the next couple of weeks to get you guys right up to spring training so we can talk real baseball at that particular time. But the American League West, I'll start out with number 5, work my way up to number 1. And unfortunately, in the basement out west, I believe it's going to be the Texas Rangers. They have a ton of needs across the board. Of course, they traded Lance Lynn to the Chicago White Sox earlier this offseason, so the rotation is a bit thin when it comes to starting pitching. They do have Kyle Gibson and Jordan Lyles at the top of the rotation. They received Dunning back from that trade with the White Sox, so he pencils into the starting rotation. And then guys like Allard, Palumbo, Benjamin filtering in behind him. I do see this as one of the weaker rotations in the American League, unless Gibson and Lyles can bounce back with good seasons, but they struggled in years past. And looking at the bullpen, there's not a lot there either. Not a lot of names, household names that people are going to recognize. You have Hernandez, Rodriguez, Martin, Herget, Hearn, DeZeus, Evans, Ramos, guys that are basically kind of fill-ins here as Texas is really looking to rebuild and retool for the future, because they moved into a brand new ballpark last season, and unfortunately with the coronavirus didn't have any fans, but I think this is kind of the trajectory that they are on. Of course, offensively, you still have names like Joey Gallo, Odor, Calhoun in the outfield, Taveras in center, but a lot of moving pieces, and really I think Texas is kind of looking to the future. They were looking to have that new ballpark, bring in a bunch of new fans, which led to new revenue, which would allow them to spend this particular offseason. But of course, everything was pushed back about a year, which may not be the worst thing for the Rangers. We talked about how next year's offseason class is a very good one, and if they have some money to spend in the bank, they could make a leap forward following that offseason class. But for another summer down there in Arlington in the new ballpark, I do think Texas is in for a long summer in regards to what could happen there offensively. I mean, Solak, Huff, Lowe, it's going to be a bit of a struggle for Texas, so I have them in the 5 spot here to begin the offseason in our predictions. Next up, number 4, and this is where number 2 through number 4, I kind of went back and forth on myself a couple of times. I mean, between the Oakland Athletics, LA Angels, and Seattle Mariners, I think there could be some leeway here in who finishes in the middle of the pack in regards to the standings. So I'm going to start out with Seattle at number 4. Honestly, I think they could move all the way up to the number 2 spot. They surprised people last year, finishing 3rd in the division. They were only 2 games behind the Houston Astros, who finished under 500 in the shortened season. And I like some of the moves that Seattle made in the offseason. I mean, we'll start out with their offense, which looks very solid once again. They added Corey Seager to third base. You have Gold Glove winner J.P. Crawford there at shortstop. If his offense continues to develop and continues to come around, they could surprise some people. You have Evan White at first base, who won a Gold Glove. The Rookie of the Year, Kyle Lewis, out there in center field. So I think the core that they are starting to build in Seattle, as well as some top prospects who could make their debut this year, could surprise some people. But the issue I see in Seattle is the starting pitching as well as the bullpen. And I think over the course of 162, just due to health and issues regarding pitching, this may be a hill that is too tough to climb for them. So at the top of the rotation, Gonzalez is solid. Sheffield is nice. Kikuchi is up there as well. They added Dunn, Flexen. And then when it comes to relief pitchers, Montero, Graveman, Sadler, Middleton, all these guys could potentially continue to develop, but I don't see it happening to the point where they will surprise a lot of people and ultimately make that jump and kind of to that next tier. The bullpen last year was one of the worst in baseball, let them down a handful of times, and as of right now, I don't see enough moves being made in order for them to jump over those next couple of teams that I discussed with you guys. But Seattle is one of those teams I'm putting an asterisk on. You know, last year I talked to you guys, I said the White Sox and Reds were going to be the teams that surprise people. And heck, I was 2 for 2 on those when it came to playoff appearances. Now the Reds certainly put it down to the wire there. Chicago was good from the jump. And I think Seattle has a chance to be one of those teams this year that really surprises that not a lot of people are on right now. So, clip this audio, come back to me when they struggle this summer. But I do think that the Mariners could be a solid ball club here in 2021 if some of the pieces fall into the puzzle the correct way. Next on the list at number 3, I have the Oakland Athletics. I know they won the AL West last year, but they're entering a bit of a rebuild phase. At least I think so. Of course, everybody knows the losses of Marcus Semien and Liam Hendricks, an all-star shortstop, one of the best closers in all of baseball. And up the middle is the hardest place and where you build your team. And to lose the top reliever and potentially one of the top shortstops in the game, I think is going to have an effect on this team that may be too big to overcome. Now, offensively, if they get some bounce-back seasons, Chapman at third base was injured last year. He struggled. If he could put it together, things could fall back into place. At DH, you have Chris Davis, who struggled last year but has been a 40 home run guy in the past. If he has a big year, they could find themselves in contention. You still have Olsen over at first base, who's fantastic. Murphy behind the dish, Loreno out in center field. So I don't think they're going to be a bad baseball team by any means. But again, I don't have them penciled in at the top end of this list just due to the losses that they have from their all-stars. Now, the rotation could be slightly underrated. I do like what they have there when it comes to Bassett, Luzardo, Manea, Montaz, Jeffries, A.J. Puck, potentially being that sixth guy from the left side. You have Jake Diekman, who should transition into more of that 8th, 9th inning role. Trevino, Weems, Smith out there in the bullpen. So I think it'll come down to pitching. I think it'll come down to replacing Semien at shortstop. There's a couple of names being floated around there, but offensively, they're going to have to carry the ace. I don't think that pitching staff is going to win a lot of games 2-1, 3-2. So if they struggle to score runs or have a few guys hit some slumps, I do think it's going to be an uphill battle for the A's to get back to the postseason this year. So I have them in the middle of the pack in regards to the division. Could certainly find themselves at the top. It's a well-run organization with Billy Beane. They seem to not want to spend on top-end talent due to their development and drafting of players. So I think the A's are still going to be competitive, but I think this is the year where ultimately it falls off and they're starting that rebuild here moving forward. That leaves 2 teams left. And number 2, I'm going with the LA Angels. I'm finally going to buy into the Angels being a playoff team or right on the cusp of the playoffs, depending on how many teams are getting in and the depth in some of the other divisions. But they continue to make some moves. I talked about last segment how they just added Alex Cobb to the rotation. You can put him with Dylan Bundy, Haney, Canning, Sandoval, Ohtani. If he stays healthy, could be a big get for them. And then offensively, you have guys who just need to stay healthy as well as produce. A lot of guys getting to the tail end of their career. But again, I still think they have enough left in the tank to ultimately compete in this division. And the guys I'm talking about, of course, Albert Pujols, coming to the end of his career at DH, first base. Shohei Ohtani potentially staying healthy and giving them a jolt of offense. You have Stassi behind the dish, and then the kind of pillars, of course, Mike Trout out in center field he's obviously an MVP favorite. I don't see any slowing down. Right now in Mike Trout's game, I only see him getting better. And when you have a guy like Trout, you add Anthony Rendon at third base, who was a big get for them in previous off seasons. This offense still could contribute. Iglesias at shortstop, Upton out in the outfield, prospect Adele out in right potentially puts it together. So I think it does come down to the pitching for the Angels. If Bundy can have another good year, if Cobb can get innings, if Canning can throw well, Haney can throw well, and then that bullpen leaves a little bit to be desired. Iglesias, Myers, Pena, Betry, Reyes, those guys are going to have to come up big because they're not the only ones with bullpen concerns. I mean, that is one of the areas across Major League Baseball that basically every team is trying to upgrade. And the Angels continue to be that team with all the names. They win the offseason every year, it seems like. Potentially still in on the Trevor Bauer sweepstakes. If they add Bauer, I would certainly pencil them in at number 1 or number 2. So I do think that they should continue to stay in those sweepstakes and make a move. But, really the Angels, I'm kind of taking a flyer here for the first time in a couple of years and saying, hey, I think this team could finally take the next step. I think Adele got some seasoning. He could be better. Trout's the greatest of all time, at least right now, potentially of all time moving forward. If Pujols can give them what they need, Ohtani stays healthy, I think the Angels could be a sneaky ball club when it comes to the postseason and moving forward. And that leaves the Houston Astros. I know last year they had a bit of a down year when it came to the regular season. They finished under 500, still made the postseason as a wild card team. And it certainly seemed like they flicked that switch when they made the playoffs. And over the course of 162, I think they're certainly going to have to be better moving forward. But from what I saw in the postseason, from the starting rotation, they still have the core of the offense together. I mean, you still have Bregman at third, Correa at short, Altuve at first, Altuve at second, Gurriel at first. You bring back Michael Brantley in the outfield. I think that was a big decision for them not to lose all 3 outfielders. You have Tucker going into right field. So I like the Yordan Alvarez coming back at DH. He missed all of last season. So the offense should put up runs and should score. And then you go to the rotation. You still have Zach Greinke. McCullers is there. And then everybody remembers Valdez, Urquidy, and Javier and what they were able to do in the postseason. So if those young guys continue to develop, they should build off that success that they had against the best teams in the postseason. And I like the way they're set up. Next, you go to the bullpen. Of course, they're still looking to add potentially in the bullpen. We talked about them being in on a handful of big names still available, but you have Presley, Taylor, Paredes, Smith, Raley, Perez out there. Still a solid ball club across the board. And at least for one more season, with the core of Bregman, Correa, Altuve, Alvarez, and Brantley, I like this offense the best in the American League West. I think they're going to score some runs, and based on the conversations we've had around the other teams and their pitching staffs, I think these guys could feast and score a lot of runs. We saw last year they won a lot of postseason games, 8-6, 7-5. They were very high scoring, but we did see some good outings from the rotation. So I do think that the Astros are the team to beat now in the American League West. But overall, this division is one of the weaker ones across baseball in regards to the depth and the quality of teams. So I only see one team coming out of this division and making the postseason. I talked to you about the Angels. I think they'll be in the wild card consideration. If the Athletics continue to hang around, they're a good organization. So there could be a fight for that wild card spot, but I truly feel as if only one team is going to come out of this division to make the playoffs. So to recap for you guys, I got the Rangers really struggling this summer, kind of being at the bottom. Seattle, Oakland, and the Angels kind of in that middle tier of if guys develop or if guys perform to exceed expectations. I think all of them could be jockeying for position in the middle of this division. Whose bullpen steps up, whose rotation steps up, that will determine ultimately who finishes second. But I like the Angels and their lineup on paper the most out of those 3 teams, which is why I have them second. And then the Houston Astros, until they completely fall off or lose that core, I'm going to have them at the top of the list and the team to beat there with Correa, Altuve, Bregman, Alvarez, and Brantley. I think they could separate themselves against the others here moving forward. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. Hit us up on social media. Where do you think guys finish? I've seen some people along the same lines of me saying Seattle could surprise, but I don't want to jump the gun, and I don't feel as confident as I did last year with the White Sox and the Reds as I do here with the Mariners. But that'll do it here for segment number 3. That'll wrap up my preview of the American League West. We're going to step aside one last time here for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, but when we come back, let's talk American League Central. Let's get into the deepest division last year in baseball. Is it going to be the same this year, or are some of the teams going to fall off? Stick around, everyone. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Appreciate you guys listening. If you're checking out this episode and you're into other sports, do me a favor. Type in GSMC to wherever you're listening to this podcast. That'll bring up all the other different shows within the podcast network. Of course, it is Super Bowl Sunday here in 72 hours this weekend. If you're listening to it, if you're in a state that allows gambling, a ton of prop bets out there to be discussed, some money to be had, a lot of over-unders, color of the Gatorade, timing of the national anthem, all that good stuff. And if you're into basketball, hockey, whatever it is, my Sixers and Flyers here locally having themselves a good start, so you can stay up to date with all of that information. Plus, if you're not into sports and you're into politics, news, books, reading, health and fitness, whatever it is out there, GSMC has a show for you. So check those out. Please like, rate, and review. That helps the network continue to grow and bring you guys quality content here on a daily basis. So let's continue our trip previewing, predicting what's going to happen here in 2021. Next up is the American League Central. This was a fantastic division last year between the White Sox, Twins, and Indians, all coming down to the wire. Everybody held first place at some point here, but these are going to be new teams for 2021. A handful of changes being made across the board, and ultimately I do see some fluctuation here potentially happening in the American League Central. But one consistent I do see is the fact that my number 5 place team will be the Detroit Tigers. They made some moves this offseason, the biggest one potentially adding manager A.J. Hinch to the organization. After Hinch sat out last season due to his role with the Astros and the cheating scandal, I think he's going to come in and bring some stability, some credibility to this ball club. He knows how to work a locker room. All the players I've spoken with who have played for him loved him, loved his interaction. So I do think that's a positive there in Detroit. And I do see some of their younger talent continuing to develop. So I think the worst is behind you if you're a Tigers fan. But ultimately, I don't see them developing into a potential threat in the division or even close to a playoff team here in 2021. In the rotation, you got Boyd, who probably should have been moved a year or two ago before he started to struggle because now his value has declined. He could still be moved at some point during the regular season as a trade consideration in regards to a contending team. But after him, you have Turnbull, Former, Scoble, and then Casey Mize potentially being a high riser for them and a former top pick who could develop into a nice left-handed starter for them. But transitioning to the bullpen, this leaves a lot to be desired. Garcia, Soto, Farmer, Jimenez, Norris, all those guys out there trying to kind of find their way, figure things out. And then offensively, just not a ton to go off of. I mean, solid guys out there. Jones out in center, Castro at second base, Candelario at first. You have Paredes at third, Cabrera DHing, of course, still, as he's on the tail end of his career. So I think the Tigers are not going to be as bad as they have been in years past, but I still don't see them taking that next level in development until maybe 1, 2, 3 years away here offensively to being able to, kind of compete with some of the rotations that have been put in place here in the American League Central. So, sorry, Tigers fans. I think it's going to be another long summer for you, but some of the young kids could make their debut, could rise quickly through the ranks, and that could be a positive sign as you transition into 2022, 2023, and making a move that way. So, next on the list, I have the Kansas City Royals still in fourth place. I know there's a lot of positivity coming out of Kansas City. A lot of the locals feel that this could be a year that they could start to turn things around and get back into consideration, but I just don't see it happening in regards to the other teams in the division. I mean, starting pitchers, Keller, Duffy, Junis, Singer, Bubic, Hernandez, all guys who could potentially get starts for them this year. A solid rotation, but not spectacular. And then you go to the relief corps of Barlow, Hahn, Zimmer, Newberry, Zuber, guys who, again, are not household names and really, I think, is going to be part of their demise when it comes to this summer and being able to compete in the American League Central. Offensively, they're hoping to get some nice bounce-back years, solid years offensively. You have Maikel Franco at third, Mondesi at short, Lopez at second. You go to the outfield, they're hoping Whit Merrifield can bounce back and have another solid year out and right. Dozier out there and left, a solid ball player. You got Soler at designated hitter, Perez behind the dish. So there are some nice pieces in place in Kansas City. So I do see the reason for optimism, but I think the rotation is just going to be solid, and I don't know if I see those guys performing up to the level that they would need to in order to potentially compete with some of the teams at the top end of this division. Now, could the Royals potentially finish third, finish right around 500? I think so. But I do think the top two teams in this division are very, very good and pretty much separated themselves from everybody else across the board here. So I think it's still a year away for Kansas City to kind of be in that consideration of a potential playoff contender. At number 3, I have the Cleveland Indians. I know they made moves this offseason. They shipped out Lindor. They shipped out Carrasco. So the rotation is pretty much Bieber, Cy Young winner. I think he's going to have another fantastic year. You have Plesac, Savali, McKenzie in the rotation. The top end of that is very good. Obviously, losing Carrasco, one of your top 3, is going to hurt, but they like some of their internal resources to be able to come in and give them some benefits. And then the bullpen. I like this bullpen in regards to, the depth that they have, as well as Karinchak at the top of the list. Yes, they moved on from Brad Hand there as well. But Whitgreen, Matten, Clace, Quantrill, those guys I think could fill in and have themselves a solid season. So the top-end talent in Cleveland is still very, very good in regards to Bieber and Karinchak on the pitching side of things. But offensively, losing Lindor, of course, they added a couple of middle infielders from the Mets. Which one's going to play second? Which one will play short? Do they have a bit of trade bait going on there? They moved on from Carlos Santana at first base. He had a down year last year, so maybe that isn't as big of a loss as it would be in years past. But Ramirez, absolutely solid over there at third. He potentially could have won the MVP award. He was in consideration last year. I really like him as a ball player. I think he's going to put together another solid campaign for them. Designated hitter Jose Reyes is still very good. Perez behind the dish. The outfield has a ton of names who could potentially start for them. DeShields out there, Luplow, Naquin, Mercado. Could play center, could play right. But ultimately, I just feel that the loss of Lindor and the loss of Carrasco is going to be too much for them to overcome. They brought back Cesar Hernandez to play second base. He's very solid for them. So I don't see the Indians completely falling off a cliff, which is why I still have them ahead of the Royals, just due to basically Shane Bieber. I'm not sure he's going to be as dominant as he was last year because that was some of the best pitching we've seen in a number of years. But if he is still very, very good, this team is going to be in consideration and going to be very tough to beat on a routine basis. So get them in a short series. You go Bieber, Plesac, Savali, Karinchak out of the bullpen. They could surprise some people. But again, anybody who loses Lindor and loses Carlos Carrasco, I think is going to feel that when it comes to the ball club this summer. So in the number 2 spot, I have the Minnesota Twins. I like what the Twins have done. Brought back Nelson Cruz to be the DH for them as well. Their infield, we talked about it. Fantastic infield, adding Simmons at shortstop, moving Polanco over to second base. You have Donaldson still at third, Sano at first base. You have Buxton and Kepler still in the outfield, so I like that lineup still. I like the right-left balance in regards to Kepler, Cruz, Donaldson, Sano. I think they're a solid team offensively. The rotation is still very solid. Barrios, Maeda, Pineda, Dobnak are the top guys there. Again, the 1-1 maybe isn't to the list of some of these other guys in their rotations, but the 2, 3, 4, 5 I think is very solid as well. And then the bullpen. You know, they lose Trevor May to the Mets, but you still have Rogers, you still have Duffy, Stashak, Thebar, Thorpe. I just like the overall pieces and how they connect there in Minnesota. Now, do I think they did enough to potentially get over that hump? They've been that team that makes the playoffs but doesn't seem to go any further. First, it was the curse of the Yankees. They haven't won a game in the Bronx in the playoffs in a number of years, and they went back and forth last year in regards to the White Sox, the Indians in first place. So I do think this team is still going to mash. I think this team's going to score a lot of runs. The top 3 of Barrios, Maeda, Dobnak will win them a lot of games. The bullpen is good enough to hang on there in the Central. So I think this team is still very good. I have them right in the middle of the wild card consideration at this number 2 spot. I would put them ahead of the Angels when it comes to that second place team and that wild card option. But ultimately, I do think that team on the south side of Chicago is going to be that first place team. And I don't think it's going to be as close as it's been in years past, because the White Sox, yes, they finally made that leap last year, but they know that they needed pieces to get them over the hump, so they added Lance Lynn to the rotation that still has Giolito, Dallas Keuchel. You got Rodon, Kopech coming back from the 2020 where he took off due to the coronavirus and some personal issues that he was dealing with. Offensively, you have the MVP of the league last year, Jose Abreu at first base. Madrigal, very good at second base. Anderson, an excellent shortstop, a lot of energy, a ton of fun to watch. Moncada over there at third base. Grandal behind the dish. Jimenez at the DH spot. You have Robert out in the outfield, who was runner-up for the American League Rookie of the Year. So I like absolutely this team. I think they're going to be fantastic. Now, the bullpen is one spot that potentially was up for debate, but after adding Liam Hendricks, Bummer, Marshall, Foster, Fry, I do think that the White Sox are certainly the clear-cut favorite in my eyes when it comes to the 2021 season in the American League. So I had them as a surprise team last year. They did surprise people. They added the pieces to get over the hump, I feel, on the pitching side of things, particularly adding Lynn to that rotation with Giolito and Keuchel. That top 3 is fantastic. You got guys who can play defense, catch the ball up the middle. The MVP coming back at first base. Robert Jr., runner-up, American League Rookie of the Year out in center. So I think this is certainly the White Sox divisions to lose here, and I don't see that happening in 2021. So to wrap things up here, we got the Detroit Tigers still in the basement. I do like the way they're going, the trajectory, their direction. The Kansas City Royals next on the list. I think they're a year or 2 away. Cleveland is still going to be able to hang on for one more season as they enter a rebuild. I have them at 3rd, and then the Twins bring back the pieces that they have, and they have enough at the top of the rotation to be able to differentiate from that bottom tier within the division. But ultimately, I don't think anybody's going to challenge the White Sox this year when it comes to the division. So I think it's the White Sox, and then a handful of games below them is the Twins. But I do think the Twins could have some playoff fight in them and will be in the wild card race until the end here. So that does it for the American League Central preview. I appreciate you guys listening in once again. Just to recap today's episode, of course, at the top, we talked about the latest allegations against Mickey Callaway and what the heck is going on in baseball in regards to sexual discretion, sexual allegations, and how I'm hearing that this could just be the tip of the iceberg and that this is something that is more transparent now within baseball across the entirety of the sport. To female reporters basically saying, hey, do this or I'm going to end your career. Just absolutely disgusting to hear more of this available. And the quote that it's going to rain down here moving forward is something to be very, very concerned about if you're a baseball fan. We then talked about all the recent signings that have taken place. The big one was Nelson Cruz. You had Sean Doolittle sign, Chris Archer, a trade made by the Angels and Orioles. And then, of course, wrapping things up, talking about the American League West and the American League Central. So those two teams, once again, the Houston Astros, I have winning the West. Angels, Athletics, and Mariners fighting for second place. Here in the Central, I got the White Sox taking it home, followed by the Twins, Indians, and Royals coming in here at the middle of the pack. But thanks again for listening, everybody. I'll ask you guys one last time here. I know I bring it up on every episode, but if you haven't done so yet, please rate and review the podcast. That's one of the most important things I ask you guys to continue to help us grow, continue to help us shoot up those lists, go from the number 13th ranked podcast into the top 10. That's the goal here in 2021. So if you guys could be a friend and tell a friend, let them know, hey, 2 weeks until spring training's coming. You might want to check out these guys at the GSMC Baseball Podcast to keep you up to date. And then head over to social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Follow us there as well. But hopefully you guys are having a great work week out there. Like I said, here in the Northeast, we're still digging out of a couple of feet of snow, but we finally, it looks like, are on the other side here. Super Bowl weekend coming up, so stay safe, stay healthy, social distance, wear your mask, but most importantly, enjoy yourself, be kind to one another, and then I will talk to you guys again on Monday. Enjoy the weekend, everyone.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.